Welcome to the Forge Truth Podcast, where we are building great men as God defines greatness. Forge is a movement of men with a mission to help all men realize they're the deeply beloved, redeemed sons of the Most High God. I'm your producer, Zach, and I'm here to discuss the issues that affect men the most with our two hosts, Dr. Pete Alwinson, lifelong pastor and leader of Forge, and Jayson Quiñones, Bishop of Core Faith Church in Oviedo, Florida. Men, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be here. Good to be here. And he's got his Forge shirt on. Looks like he's going to the gym right after this.
Being holy today. I'm
there
holy.
it is.
I'm living holy.
I know. Yeah.
I love that. Well, we are joined again by Scott McCurdy, and he is going to talk to us about a topic that we haven't covered on the show at this level of specificity. We've had a show about alcoholism, but today we're going to talk about functional alcoholism, functioning alcoholics, which is a topic that is close to your heart, Scott. And so let's get into it, okay? So what is functional alcoholism?
Functioning alcoholism is probably the greatest lie that a man can live with. Because I today currently am about 5 years of drinking no alcohol at all. I've had a slip or two in that 5 years. But the beauty in that is that God has so convicted my heart that in those slips, I was so convicted to not slip again that currently I haven't. But I want to say this. There's probably not a single day that goes by that I don't think about having a drink. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not the guy that sat in the alley that had the brown paper bag with the coat wrapped around him and had to have a drink. I've never had withdrawals. I've never had convulsions. There's never been a bodily function that went out of whack because I didn't have a drink. I was not that kind of guy. I didn't drink during the day. I didn't drink at business meetings. I drank in the privacy of my travels. I go back to my room, buy a bottle or two of wine, get a pizza delivered to the room, and drink. And I'm kind of a finisher. If I opened a bottle, I finished it. But there are so many men that function like that and look at their life and think, well, I'm not hurting anyone. Just like myself, I didn't really believe that I was hurting anyone because I wasn't going to bars, I wasn't driving, I was in no trouble of getting pulled over by the police. I just was in the privacy of my own room doing my own thing. And yet I was destroying my life and my family because they knew it.
Well, how did they know it then? If you weren't, you're doing drinking mostly on business trips?
Correct, because I'm a chatty Cathy. And when I drank, I wanted to get on the phone and talk. And when you've had too much to drink, you normally slur your words. And you don't say things that are really making any sense. And it was funny how it always was around 8 or 9 o'clock at night while I was away. And so I gave myself away. And I truly believe that God was allowing me to do that so that I would finally get the hammer laid down to me. And my wife, one day when I came home, it got so bad my wife bought a breathalyzer. So she would make me blow into the breathalyzer to prove whether I had or had not been drinking.
Wow.
And even when it went off, I'd say it was wrong. I said, you bought a malfunctioning breathalyzer. And was really good at convincing her that it probably was. And I came home, and she figured it out, and she laid the hammer down and said, either stop drinking or move out. And this was 5 years ago.
Wow.
And to be honest with you, there probably was very few other than my family that knew that I was dealing with alcohol in the way that I was dealing with it. If you'd probably ask any friend, any coworker, any client I had, they probably would have been shocked.
Right. Well, you came to me. We've been friends, and I didn't know.
Yeah.
And until you told me,
Right.
I wouldn't have known. Now, when you say functional, it's important to point out that Scott has been very functional and successful construction owner, salesman. I mean, over the top. You're in the top 1% of guys that have really achieved a lot. So, you don't know Scott maybe, but you need to understand he's been successful.
Yeah.
And so, that idea is you were able to function and be successful.
Correct.
You were at the top of your game all your career. You never got to the bottom of your game.
Correct.
And alcohol didn't bring you down in that sense, but it hurt your closest relationships.
Right. And I believe alcohol played a huge role in the separation of me and my own son. It broke kind of our family up. In other words, these were all behind the scenes things. These were not obvious. If I didn't share that with someone, you would have never known that that would be. In other words, the functioning alcoholic it's almost like slow suicide and no one notices.
Wow.
Very scary.
Well, I think the one thing that you've alluded to this, but you haven't said it clearly, is that for most of this time you were a Christian.
Most of it, all of it. For 35 years, this last 35 years, I've been a Christian, walking with God, doing my dog, having the privilege of bringing people to Christ and the whole 9 yards. I've brought people to Christ on an airplane drinking wine. It's not like, I've lived this rotten life. On the surface, I was a good guy. Maybe even a guy that someone said, I'd like to be like him. The scary part is no, you really wouldn't. And I didn't know that until 5 years ago. And to be honest with you, I'm still learning that. Mm-hmm. It still has a hold on me. Mm-hmm. There are moments when, even on just this past weekend, we went on a hunting trip together.
Right.
I mentally was trying to figure out a way, since I'm away from home and I'm not going to get caught, of how to sneak a drink.
Yeah.
And all of that was out there. And I didn't. But I battled it.
Yeah.
In other words, you're never safe. In other words, there's never going to be a day until the day I die and go home to see Jesus that I'm not going to have that nagging addiction in the back of my life, in the back of my mind, because I am an addict.
And that's one of the biggest admissions to make. You got to get the first step. You've come to that point, and you've
Correct.
seen that. By the way, I think that pertains to a lot of us men in the whole area of sin. We all have something in our background of sin, whether it's sexual addiction or, we're addicted to sin. And Jesus has broken the back and the power of it, but we are all drawn back to some sins, overeating, working out, you name it. We could be addicted to just about anything.
Well, I've always said, if I'm such of an addictive personality that if I had a pencil collection, it'd be the largest pencil collection ever.
It'd be the best one.
It'd be the best.
Yeah,
the biggest and the best and most exotic. So I've never done anything halfway. It's always been all the way. So my grandfather even talked about my dad. My whole family's been alcoholics for as far back as you can go. And my grandfather would say, I always wanted a champion, and I got me one, a champion drinker. That was my dad.
So I just want to, before we move on from this, I want to just drill down, because I know that you said that it wasn't until 5 years ago when your wife laid the hammer down and it's like, hey, you either move out or, stop drinking. But as a Christian man, I wonder, was there conviction that you knew what you were doing was wrong when you were getting drunk?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So this wasn't like it wasn't like you were walking around like, oh, I'm good. You knew.
No.
So privately, there was a struggle. There was a real battle that was going on where you felt that condemnation, you felt that conviction, and so I think that's important for Christian men to know. Yeah.
I was in repentful mode almost every day of my life for doing, and then would pray, don't let me, help me not do this again. And then just give in to it and go right about my way. And I truly believe that my nature is of such that I wanted it to get bad enough to where I was issued an ultimatum. I'm the kind of guy that Jesus Christ has had to drag over every threshold that I've ever done in my entire life, even with him, because I have not gone freely. It's had to be rough, tough, bruised. I'm bloodied. I almost have to make as big a scene coming to realization as I did understanding. You know, so
In other words, some of us need a whoop upside the head. You know, I mean, pretty
sometimes
strong.
a baseball bat.
And that's important for us as men to figure out, because we're like, a lot of times I will tell people, I say, I'm a freight train schedule wise. I'm a freight train. I'm going. And to stop me, I had to learn to stop myself with my wife, you know, so I can, you know, be more relational, because I want to get stuff done.
Yeah.
But anyway, I wonder how many men are in this category. Scott's story cannot be unique.
No.
I wonder how many men are struggling with functional alcoholism, and maybe they've been pressing down the spirit's conviction.
If you could get honesty, I think the number would stagger you. I don't think you'll ever get honesty, because when you're a functioning alcoholic, you don't believe you have a problem. In other words, because you're not hurting anyone.
You're functional.
You're functioning. I've done my job. I've succeeded. I've got a nice home. My family eats well. We do nice things. We go on great vacations. But you're a closet alcoholic is what you really are. In other words, like it or not, that's what you are. And I could, you know, the lie right now to me today is, in other words, my wife still to this day will have a glass of wine. I'll open the bottle for her, pour the thing, sometimes smell it, because I really like the smell of good red wine. And fortunate for her, I had a great collection that she's now finishing. But I don't really want the drink at that particular point. But what I would love to say to myself is, I can just have a glass.
That's what
And
you want to say.
I do say it to myself. In other words, and I'll have other people come over and watch. I watch people not even drink the whole glass and mentally inside go, how could you waste that? I mean, so I know in my heart of hearts that okay, maybe tonight I could have a glass. And maybe tomorrow night I could have a glass. But I promise you, let it go a week or 10 days or whatever, and now I'm on 2 glasses. And now I'm on 3, and I'm right back. It's kind of like the smoker. I was a smoker for 31 years. I quit 100 times. I quit one time for a year and picked up a cigarette after a year of struggle and lit it, and it was as if I never quit.
Yeah.
Went right back to smoking. Alcohol is the same thing. The bottom line for me is I can never have another drink as long as I live, if I want to not ever fall back into what I was in.
So we can say from a biblical standpoint that the Bible does not rule out drinking alcohol. It doesn't.
Right.
But it says all things are lawful, but not all things are profitable.
Correct.
All things are lawful, but I will not be mastered by anything. And so I think that helps us as a general principle. What is mastering us? What's controlling us? Other than the Spirit of the living God.
Absolutely. And you're right, Pete. I don't have any issue really with people having a drink. In other words, my temptations are not brought on by someone else doing something that I know I cannot do. In fact, in one sense of the word, for me, now that my heart's been convicted, and I'm no longer, not that my heart was never convicted, it's just the conviction I have right now is that I really do know the difference between what is right for me and what is wrong for me. I don't believe God looks on me and says, Scott, you should never have another drink because alcohol is bad. I think what he does is he reminds me that I can't handle alcohol. So don't. I think people take lightly about addiction and alcoholism. I believe the gene of alcoholism, I believe, exists, and I believe it's passed on through generations. There's not a single sibling of mine, nor a child of my siblings, that has not struggled with alcohol. My sister currently is in AA, struggling. In other words, it's struggling in a sense that she is dealing with not wanting to drink. She's drank free for 2 years, but really had a grip on her.
Yeah.
What desire or what role was alcohol playing in your heart? Like what emptiness was it filling? What temptation was it speaking to?
I think, to me, alcohol was the anesthetizer to the struggles. I mean, just owning a business and managing people and being all over the country. And then I think what exasperated it even more for me was then when I had the falling out with our own son, and I just didn't know how to deal with it. I mean, let me restate that. I knew exactly how to deal with it because I could have turned to God, and I turned to alcohol because it was easy. It was instant. God doesn't instantly answer me that I'm aware of about anything. And most of the time, when he does answer me, I'm too busy to remember or even get that he did answer me. But alcohol was instant. I could get instant relief, except I never did get relief. It never brought me what I was looking for. In fact, it took me deeper into what I was looking for and never could find it. It was almost like that take binoculars and turn them around. It was almost like my life began to be, I was looking through the binoculars backwards.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Zach. And that usually we do go to something when we're dealing with stress. We go to food, we go to sex, we go to drink. So we go to something, and to really believe that God can solve all of our issues is we know it. It's difficult. He doesn't do things all the way right away.
Right.
But he does them all the way.
Correct.
For me to know that's true is how I often wake up in the morning, just fresh, just not good, and it's coffee and Jesus, that gets me set right. Like even this morning, I just didn't feel focused, but a little time in the Word and a little time with Him, He leads us in the path that is good.
And I think that's excellent, and I believe that is what drove me to be so consistent with my daily appointment with God.
Yeah.
But the day wore me down.
Yeah. At the end of the day, see, I think that's really true. I think a lot of our temptation, we can start out right, and at the end of the day, we're physically, emotionally worn out. And that's where a lot of sin can come and a lot of running to other places.
To me, it reminds me of by no means am I making a comparison, but Jesus was 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. When Satan called on him, he was at his weakest moment in life. Right. At the end of every day, every man is at his weakest moment in life. In other words, no comparison to the two, but I never was tempted in the morning. I was always tempted at the end of a given day. And when your day starts at 2 a.m. and you finally get to 7 o'clock p.m. at that end of that day, and you've been traveling all day long and working, you're at the end of your day. And that's when it got me the most. Thinking all the while that was going to revive me, when all it did was cause me to turn the binoculars around. I'm looking through the wrong end.
Well, it's a depressant. Alcohol is a depressant.
Yeah.
But we go to something that we think is going to help us, and then it puts its hooks in us.
Correct.
And every addiction is that way.
Correct.
So obviously 5 years ago, something shifted. Your wife threatened you. That was awesome. But now what happens at the end of your day at that point? Like what changes, right? Because obviously you're still going to start your day at 2. You're still going to go through the same grind. You woke up at 2, you did your Devo, spend time with the Lord, but now you're coming to, so what changed? What shifted?
That's a really good question. I think I saw the look of desperation in my wife. And it broke my heart. It made me feel like a fraud. And she looked at me and said, you have no credence in pouring into anyone's life with this lifestyle that you're living. And that struck me to the core. And I believe what God did was open up a pathway in me for me to see it that way. Through her eyes, I became empathetic. Maybe I'm not a very empathetic guy just by nature. I mean, I'm hardcore. I was raised hardcore. I'm kind of hardcore. I love people, but I think all of a sudden everything came to a head with her, and I saw what I had really done to her most of my
Right.
life, and I felt compassion in a way that I'd never seen it before, and I just surrendered. Again,
Yeah.
I think I had another epiphany in my life. I mean, I think Jesus spoke to me in a very special way. He didn't deliver me from alcohol like he had drugs and the other issues in my life, where I can take no credit whatsoever for not doing either one of the issues that I asked God to take away from me, because he delivered me. But he opened me up in a way that I just maybe saw myself as she was looking at me, and then I saw the pain that I was causing. It's just not worth it. I mean, I thought I'm bigger than this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what happened is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all the way up until this point, you know, you have those other issues, the addictions, things like that. You're like, Lord, you got to take this from me. I know that this is wrong, and I know how destructive this is. But I think what you had been doing with the alcohol is you had been justifying in your mind, right? Well, hey, it's okay to drink, right? So that's fine. I'm not hurting anyone, right. so I'm good. And then but you're still struggling in silence, and you're asking God, please deliver me. And that's the thing that I think that a lot of guys do, is that they're in silence. And they're going through all of those rationales, and they're like, hey, it's not a sin to do this, but God, please deliver me. I don't want to expose myself to anyone. Right. And so you're in that struggle, but then you finally realized that your sin was really affecting others.
Yes.
And I think that becomes a real thing, is that we don't realize how it's affecting others. You know, you said something that I think is important. I thank God he delivered me from that alcohol gene, but my grandfather was a functional alcoholic, you know, just like you in that sense. He might have been a little bit more alcoholic, you know, but his sin affected his sons, you know, in a big way. And affected so many other parts of our family, right? And I think that was such a big thing, just realizing, man, my sin I've justified, and I've made myself believe that this isn't affecting anyone, but it is. And when somebody finally, and someone you love dearly, is like, oh, this is killing me.
Yeah.
And I just think for men, like, we've got to realize that, like, don't struggle in silence, right? Like recognize that this is a struggle, whatever it is. It's alcohol, pornography, because all of these sins, you think it's not hurting anyone, it is hurting others.
Absolutely.
And you may justify yourself out of it, but it is affecting others.
There's no victimless sin.
Right. No, none at all.
Right.
And I've left out too. My daughter became embarrassed of me and sad for me. My son-in-law knew. I mean, it just is so demoralizing. In other words, when I that was going on, but I never saw it. And I think God used my wife as the vessel for me to see my own reflection in the mirror. And when I saw that reflection, I did not like what I saw.
Yeah.
Even though everyone around me thought I was a great guy, you know.
I think the real heartbreaking thing for me, as I'm contemplating about this, is that it's not just the alcohol, but it's all of the things that come along with it. All the lies and the hiding of yourself. You know, that part of you did not give your wife or your family the opportunity to know you in, right? You had to hide that part from yourself. All the lies that are told in order to hide that self from you. It's just separates you from relationship.
Yes.
It separates you from God in that way. And all of that comes along. I mean, Pete talks about how addiction comes in pairs with spares. And it's all the stuff that's like tied up into it. It's not just the alcohol, even though that has mastery over you and it controls you, but all the things you do to self-protect, to hide, that's really the heartbreaking thing about it to me.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
My question for you is, there are men listening right now who might be in the place that you were at 5 years ago, and they might not realize it. So as part of a wake-up call, how would you kind of describe, like, hey, if this is you, you might be a functional alcoholic? What are the signs that people could look at themselves in their own lives and start to identify, wait, maybe that is me. Maybe I've been hiding this from myself. What would you say to them?
That's a great question, and I'm really glad you asked it, because I was about to spurt that out, the next thing. Men, if you are women, because I guess mostly men are listening to this, but if you come home on every given day and find that you make yourself a drink, now, because a drink can lead to as many as you want to afterwards, but a drink every given day, I believe that you need to pause. I also believe that you need to see if you can do that not do that for 3 days in a row, not do that for a week in a row. In other words, I believe alcoholism is a very quiet sneaker upper. And you can convince yourself that coming home and having a drink or two every evening, maybe before you have dinner, and then maybe a nightcap after you have dinner, that there's really not a problem there. There really is a problem there if you cannot stop doing that. And I would venture a guess that most men that have been accustomed to doing exactly what I just said are doing it a lot more than that and just won't admit it.
Mm-hmm.
The only way that you can free yourself from alcohol, if you have that problem, is to free yourself from alcohol. Mm. And don't let the evil one convince you that you can just have a drink.
And usually you don't get through something like this alone. AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and other organizations have shown that we do need to be honest. Grace, and Forge is about grace. Grace enables us to face ourselves, knowing that once we say that we are God's sons, we can face anything because our sins are not held against us, right. And we can say, okay, I may be an alcoholic, but more, I'm God's son, and I need to deal with this.
That's true, and I will add to this. I did go to AA. I promised my wife that I would start going to AA after I got convicted. And I went for 6 months. It was during COVID, and COVID kind of killed the gathering at that particular time. And as God will have it, it's interesting. I've never been in a crowded room in my entire life and not had something to say. I'm just not wired that way. I mean, you could put me on a stage right now in front of 10,000 people and tell me to talk about something that I know nothing about, and I'm going to talk about something. Okay. I sat in AA for 6 months, once a week for 6 months, and never said anything other than, my name is Scott McCurdy, and I'm an alcoholic. I've never experienced that in my entire life. And I will say this, one of the greatest memories that I have out of that entire gathering is men were sharing, and there were all types of, there were the kind that were in the alley and stuff like that, but I had one man share, he said that he drank so much, and he was 25 years sober. He drank so much that every time he gave a urine test, there was an olive in it. I almost fell over backwards in my chair.
Gosh. Oh,
gosh. Sorry about that.
No, that's part of that. That fits Forge,
That's an image I will not be able to get out of
my mind. Right.
Well, Scott, I really appreciate your honesty and you're talking about this important topic. I think there are men that are listening today that needed to hear what you had to say. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And that's going to be it for this episode of the Forge Truth podcast today. But we'd love if you would join the conversation. So leave a comment, email the show at forgetruth.com. If this is something that you have struggled with, are struggling with, please reach out to someone, let them know, and start today to follow God closer. Jayson, will you leave a challenge for our men?
Yeah. One other thing that I would add to what Scott said, man, he struggled by himself and he knew he was wrong. There was no question. If you would have asked him, he would have said no, but now he admits And so I would just say, guys, if you're by yourself and you're struggling with addiction and you're waiting for God to deliver you, man, I want to read this scripture to you because I think it's so important. It's in James chapter 5, starts in verse 16. It says, confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed.
Amen.
Don't battle this alone. Mm-hmm. And don't wait for God to reach in and deliver you. He's calling you to confess to one another. Now, don't get in the middle of church on Sunday and jump up and say, hey, I'm an alcoholic. No, man, find some guys who you can trust and you can confess your sin to and let them pray for you that God can bring healing to you from this and affirm to you that you are the deeply beloved Son of the Most High God.